Welcome to Fontcast, Tasmania's top-rating political podcast, and today we've got a cracker for you. The Premier of Tasmania, Jeremy Rockliff, exclusive and unplugged. Joining me to put the Premier through his paces is my business partner, Brad Stansfield.
Hello, Beach. Hello, Premier. Hello, David, who you're about to introduce.
And the Chief Political Reporter at the Mercury newspaper, David Killick. Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Premier, and welcome to the Fontcast.
Thank you, Becher. Hello to you all. Hello, Brad, and hello, Dave.
Right, we'll get straight down to business. My first question, and the hardest one of the day, so we're going to start putting you on the back foot. When did you find out you were coming on the Fontcast?
Not too distant future away. It was all past. It's, I look forward to listening to or being briefed on the Fontcast at the very least. But it's great to be here in person.
I think he's saying he's opened his diary up and said, "What is that?
Shit, what's happening? How did this get in the diary?" Anyhow, let's start, Premier. Let's start at the beginning. Tell us your log cabin story. Where did you grow up and what led you to where you are today?
Grew up in the northwest coast beach, a place called Sassafras.
I know it well.
Where the Big Spud is and not too far away from Devonport. And farmer by trade, and learnt a lot on the farm. The great thing about farming is that you learn to be resourceful. In this game of politics, you can have everything mapped out, 100-day plans and all that, wake up and it goes awry.
Yep.
But farming's about being resourceful, being nimble in your approach, working very hard for the right outcome and being motivated. And I learned a lot about looking after neighbours and friends along the way. And so people talk about my farming background, though, as leading me into politics, and certainly it did, because I remember a time on the farm where it was bloody hard work. The prices weren't where they are today in terms of red meat prices. I'm sure other commodities, of course, are challenging, but not enough reward for effort and not enough regional representation. So that's what motivated me to be interested in politics. But I always remember as a kid in school reading editorials of newspapers, being fascinated in politics, probably at the exclusion of other mates around me, but I always found politics, pretty, interesting. And I, almost carved my political awareness, if you like, around some of those discussions and around the dinner table and all those sorts of things and editorials. But, in addition to that, can I say that one of the things that really propelled me into politics was actually getting outside of my comfort zone and outside of the farming experience. And farming's great, but I wanted something else. And so, I've explained and told this story before many times, but around me were a number of young people in rural and regional areas, and further afield, a lot in the media about young farmers in particular, depression, challenges on the farm, economic circumstances that led to tragedy. And, in all walks of life, you have your ups and downs. I've had a few of those as well. What led me to the Lifeline organisation was a challenging period in my life. And that opened up a whole new world. I learnt a lot about people, and when you are, counselling people in the middle of the night on the phone, you learn a lot about people. The world's not black and white; a lot of grey. And in those days, you used to counsel people. I used to go in between the hours of 11 at night and 7 in the morning. Because that fitted in with my farming routine. So you often got the most distressed calls in the middle of the night. And we only focused then as a Lifeline telephone counsellors in the 004 district, Northwest Coast. And so I remember a couple of conversations, particularly around people being impacted by discrimination and prejudice, that led them to contemplating, and in some circumstances during the process of ending their life. And that really strikes at the core. You get a really good understanding of your values through that. And that led me to being on the Board of Governance of Lifeline, training counsellors, and then got involved with drug and alcohol agencies and youth shelters and things like that. So combination of that hard work, reward for effort, farming stuff, but also supporting vulnerable people in our community.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember meeting you when you first came to politics and Parliament and chatting with a few people around you about that kind of activities. And were you a bit shy back then? Was that a fair call?
Yes, I'm an introvert by nature, and so I've often found the politics very challenging, and I actually don't like being the centre of attention. Believe it or not, I'm sure my people that contribute to my Facebook page would think otherwise, but actually I am more introverted, and I've seen politicians that are centre of attention, and that's natural and all those sorts of things. But you grow into the role. But I'm generally a shy person, introverted person. But I always enjoy the company of people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about when you were first elected to Parliament in 2002. I think it was the Bacon slide. Where the Bacon, Jim and Paul were really at the peak of their powers, and you and Will jointly campaigned, I think, as fresh new faces. And what was that like when you were first turning up?
Nerve-wracking, in actual fact. And I saw actually the meme of the Uni Review, Honey, I Shrunk the Libs, just the other day. It came up on my Facebook or Reels or whatever they're called. And I remember that time because there was myself and Will, Peter Gutwin, Brett Whiteley as the new members of Parliament, 4 of us, 3 remaining members, being Rein, Sue Napier, and of course Michael Hodgman.
Yep.
And
was it the Magnificent Seven?
Yeah, it was.
It was the Magnificent Seven, and there was all the discussion about we could fit into a telephone box and meeting and all those sorts of things. But it was very daunting at the time, and excuse the French, but I was absolutely crapping myself. Because across the chamber, not only were our resources constrained, but across the chamber there was the likes of Jim Bacon, Paul Lennon, Brian Green. There was Heading New Straps, Judy Jackson, all these people that were very experienced and really overpowering in the Parliament. Not to mention other very good performers such as Peg Putt, who increased her number of people as well. So it was really a challenging experience for me, and I've learnt to grow in the role, clearly, but it was quite daunting, and I really questioned whether or not this was for me at the beginning. I loved all the constituent work. I focused on that because I realised at the point I wasn't going to be the best parliamentary performer in the first couple of years or more. So I've got to do what all new MPs should do and go to the opening of an envelope, get to know your electorate, and really make a great effort in helping people that come through the door of all walks of life.
The cartoonists used to draw you and Will as 2 kids playing in the sandpit. What was it like being the newbie in the Parliament against Bacon and Lennon, who, as you say, I mean, they really were at the height of their powers?
Yes, they really were. And we had lost our leader and deputy leader at that election. And so, we're all very new. You could argue Will had some insight into politics, but, it's very different when you're there. And, the dynamics between having the deputy leader at the time, Will, and Michael Hodgman, who I sat next to, who was a very good mentor, I have to say, at that particular time, as was Sue and Rein. They were fantastic. But it was daunting. And I thought, what really has always driven me is policy. I love policy. Brad would probably remember this. In opposition, I enjoyed developing policy. Didn't always get through the system, but at least I had a crack at it.
Yep.
And, thinking, to really implement policy, and I was coming up with ideas and those sorts of things that the government were implementing at the time. They'd acknowledged sometimes, which was great. That thank you, Jeremy. Well, this is a good idea, but really to be in government's where it's at. And I thought, gee, this is going to be a really hard road. So you had to dig deep. All the stuff you've learnt on the farm, on all those sorts of things in terms of resourcefulness, hard work, reward for effort. No greater example than being opposite, Jim Bacon and Paul Lennon with a team of 7 people.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, you mentioned how hard it was when you first started. Now, rein hitting tells a story. I want to know if it's true. Probably not, given rein. But he claims that when you first got elected, he took you and Will and a few others in to give you some question time practice. And his version of the story is that you were really, really worried about it, crapping yourself, as you say, until you realised you would only be asking the questions and not answering them. Is that true?
Look, to be honest with you, it is. I was, Rein was in there, got us all together and, all his experience, etc. And I was a little bit exercised because he was going through the process. So we'd stand up, minister this, minister that. And you don't really appreciate, despite all the fact that I had a farming background, I've spoken about the matters that also interested me outside of farming, but you don't realise until you get into Parliament how much you actually don't know because the corporate knowledge builds over time. And I've got a good corporate knowledge now. I've been almost 23 years in Parliament. But I wasn't too worried about asking the questions. And I did say, Rein, yeah, but what happens when they ask us questions? And he said, Rocky, that's not how it works. Right, so Rein is telling, he's not embellishing there at all, and so it became a little bit easier after that point. Of course, it took till 2014 until I knew what it was going to be like, speaking of the hard road there in terms of being asked questions in Parliament, which of course I get 90% of them these days.
Speaking of stories, I've heard a few times a story doing the rounds about how my colleague Brad Stansfield, who's known for his tactfulness at times here, once sent you a very rude all caps email
back in the day,
and subsequently what happened? Can you elaborate on that one for the record?
Yes, I can.
Oh no, he remembers.
I do remember it almost to the day. In fact,
Yep.
I was given a job to do. That was to drive from Devonport to Launceston to do a media conference
On a Sunday or something.
It was something like that.
Yeah.
And I was asked to deliver these lines, which of the memory were irrespective of the question.
It would have been forestry.
It was
or
forestry
crap.
related. And I delivered everything but those lines. And I was on the way home and received a email it was at the time, in full capital letters, berating me enormously for wasting everyone's time, frankly. And so I thought, bugger this, I was really, really angry. So I was actually during the weekday, Brad, and drove from Devonport office to Launceston. And so I wasted 3 hours of everyone's time, including my own. I thought, bugger this. So I went for a run to ease out the pressure, and got bitten by a dog on the way. And then found myself in the Mersey ED at night.
Lucky it was open.
3 or 4
It was a
stitches.
big dog, not just a little...
No, it was one of those yappy spaniels, So it wasn't, I've actually been bitten by a German Shepherd before when I was about 4, but that's another story. That was a bit more serious. Found myself in the ED, and then, of course, my wife was getting text messages from people that had heard I was in the ED and all those sorts of things. But if I continue the story about my run of luck, the next morning I woke up, stitches in the back, and jumped in the car, and I ran over the family cat, which was, pretty devastating for all of us. Yeah. So, do you want me to continue?
That's probably
Is there more?
I think there was something else happened along the way that was unlucky, but no. That wasn't because of you, Brad. It was because cat was in the way and all sorts of things. But, so a few interesting moments there that I can well remember my interactions with one B Stansfield.
Moral of the story: stick to the message.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or the choo-choo will get you. Crikey.
Well, the joys of a full caps email from Brad Stansfield, which is something some of us in this room have all had the joy of experiencing.
I don't think I have.
No,
I
there
don't
you
think
go.
I get phone calls.
No.
Now and again. Or used to.
We're colleagues now.
Great. Okay. The job, it's a really interesting job. I mean, I sit and watch people do this job. They come from all walks of life. And you look at the skills they bring to it. You look back at that time, 23 years ago, and say to yourself, geez, I was really underdone. I thought I went through I stood for election, I got pre-selected, I got elected, and I turned up and there was just, I wish I'd known then, what I knew now. What do you think, you've really learned along the way that has made all the difference?
Well, there's no substitute for experience, and if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have peaked too early, if you get my drift.
Yeah.
And so you need to accept where you are. And so I knew at that particular time I wasn't a good parliamentary performer. I couldn't speak underwater. I had to learn that task. And so my objective was to really concentrate on my electorate, engage with my constituency, be out and about, give every single person that walked through the door, irrespective of circumstance or background, the time of day and more. And that was a way of being good at your local base job, which, I wouldn't be speaking to you today if it wasn't for the fact that you got to look after your base job. And thankfully, Braddon have re-elected me, I think, 7 times, which is, I thank them for that because it gives me a great privilege of being able to make a difference. But then you want to be a shadow minister and develop policy and be good at that, work hard, engage with your stakeholders, which I did at the time. I was Prime Minister's shadow minister and a few other things at the time. And then, of course, in 2006, I became Will Hodgman's deputy, and I was his deputy for 14 years. And then you want to do the best job you can at that. And we were very green in terms of inexperienced at the time, and I wore a lot of criticism too when I was deputy leader of being too soft and all those sorts of things, not aggressive enough, which again I had to learn to be more assertive, but also sticking to my values of being away from the personal tax and all those sorts of things. I've largely over the last couple of decades avoided that kind of behaviour, and but it was difficult, and people calling for my head, and there was people that wanted to take over my job internally and all those types of things. So it was difficult, bad editorials. I remember a time, now I'm not sure if it was because we're in the fishbowl, but there seemed to be more editorials about how shit the opposition was
Doesn't
than the
happen
government.
these days.
If I remember it correctly, but the number one thing that I had to do was be loyal to Will. So whatever I heard about the leader, whatever people wanted me to say about the leader so they could pass on to someone else, I didn't buy into any of that. And so being the loyal deputy was the number one focus, apart from the base job of the constituents and the shadow ministers and things like that. And so that gets you into, you build up corporate knowledge. There's no substitute for that. And of course, 2006, it was 8 years hard slog in the mix of it in terms of that 2006 to 2014. Of course, 12 years we were in opposition. But we can speak about the disappointment, if you like, of the 2010 election. We had half a chance of winning. Didn't quite get there. And, that's also character building as well.
Just pick up on something you said early, you hinted at early on. Did you ever think you'd be here this long?
No. No, I didn't.
So it's very long innings.
It's a long innings, and none of my family expected me to be either. I promised my dear wife it'd be 10 years. I said 10 years. And, 10 years in Parliament when you first start Parliament seems like a very long time. But, it was, 8 years into the 2010 election. That was a minority government, Labor Green minority government, so we had to work hard then to propel ourselves to 2014. So there was always something there was always, a light at the end of the tunnel, or something you look forward to or aspire to, work hard for. And it's, you know,
So have you renegotiated the 10 years? Have you put another... I've got to ask.
I've
It's
been
open-ended now.
very lucky and have the support of all my family, including Sandra and my daughters as well. And I was elected in 2002. Ruby was born, our first, in 2005. They know no other life but the life of politics, and they've also been largely shielded from the worst of it because they've grown up with, you know, the social media and all those types of things which they're used to. Sometimes it's difficult, as you'd appreciate, but we try and manage the social media as much as possible so the family don't see all the worst of it. But, you know, I've been given enough time as I need to be given until I lose the fire in the belly, which I haven't lost.
Well, I think that's a good sort of opportunity to segue. I mean, people have been writing you off ever since day one. I think Barry Prismal seemed to do it on a fortnightly basis.
I used to wait for the Barry Prismal articles. Thought, what the hell is he going to say about me now?
Yeah.
And, you know, and anyway.
Even the last state election, you know, Rebecca White was a shoo-in, you were gone. What keeps you going?
Well, I'm clearly resilient, I think, and I believe in what I'm doing. I like making a difference, and the fact that you can make a difference in government, and you can make a difference as a local member, as a shadow minister, but particularly as a minister, indeed a premier. And, you know, we spoke about my journey on Lifeline earlier on in this forum, and Will Hodgman appointed me to be the first Minister for Mental Health ever in Tasmania. And then we made some great reforms in terms of emergency health response for mental health and all those types of things. And so making a difference drives me, and I get excited about policy and politics. I don't play politics hard, but it excites me.
Yeah, okay.
And I like being immersed in it, and I like meeting people.
Okay, so I'm probably going to get to the money shot with this one. How long can you keep it going?
Well, I reckon I can keep it going for as long as Braddon wants me to keep going. Look, there's always a date where you say, you know, maybe it's best that I give others a go, but that's the electorate to make that determination. But I'm not looking at when. I'm just looking at all the stuff we've got to do now, and there's a lot on our agenda. We've had some challenges in the last 12 months, but we've also achieved a lot in the last 12 months. We've got a very structured and focused plan that we're delivering on, and I'm excited about 2025.
All right. Now we're starting to get to the harder questions. So, and you alluded to this earlier, you're what's known in the Liberal Party as a moderate, in inverted commas.
Yeah.
You've copped a lot of criticism, including by me,
Yep.
in the first phase of your premiership for being too left, shall we say, and doing unliberal things. I might be unfair, but my observation is that has moderated a bit more in more recent times, if I could use that term. How do you reflect on that, on being a Liberal Premier, a moderate Liberal Premier in a state where the Liberal Party is and voters are pretty conservative?
That's a good question, and I'd also point to the fact that I've always been myself, so people know where I stand on some of the more social issues that you may be reflecting on. And when I think of the Braddon electorate that voted 19% for a republic in 1999, 27% for the Voice referendum in October 23, and everyone knows where I stand on those issues, on the issues of inclusiveness in our community, and what I think people respect in members of Parliament is that they have a view, and they're not, scared to express it. And what I'm pointing to I am from a very conservative electorate, blue-collar conservative electorate. But I've been really humbled by the fact that, I've done well there in terms of the support in my electorate as well. So people like having a view of things and not being bashful about that. But the important thing is in politics and mainstream politics and major political parties is that you govern from the centre, and some of those issues you speak about really, to me, is not from the prism of politics per se, although that's what the discussion we're having now. But if it means that we can include people, and if that means, for me, that means just being kind and generous and caring for people is what drives me.
I do just want to tease that out a bit. I mean, there's no denying my experience of you, Jeremy. The mood in the community is that you're a well-liked man. Do you know what I mean? That the community warm to you because of who you are, not necessarily your politics or who you are as Premier, but more the person that you are. But there's been times, I think, in Parliament when, in a classic case of beware the quiet man angered, we've seen Jeremy Rockliff perhaps show his teeth a bit, with Elise Archer, with John Tucker, and then with Dean Winter when he flirted around the no confidence motion. I mean, when we see that, you see people literally calling out for more of that from Jeremy. They call out for more of the hard man, as it were. Why don't we see more of that?
Well, the important thing is that you see it when it needs to be done. I could probably do it every day, but it wouldn't be genuine. And so the message there probably is that when you need someone to step up, I do, or be hard, I do, but I don't make it a thing for the sake of it. I can get through and achieve what I need to achieve by being myself.
Okay.
I was just, in that same vein that we were exploring before. I mean, at the times, I don't know, I don't want to breach cabinet confidentiality or anything like that, but the Liberal Party's a broad church. Are there times where you wonder whether you joined the right party, or do you find yourself thinking, hang on a minute, I've got more in common with that mob over there than this mob in this room? There's a diverse range of views and a big mix of people in your
there's
party.
a big mix of people, but I'm a Liberal through and through. I fundamentally, when I was a young Lib, and I was a young Lib back in 93 and 94, I read the party beliefs out at the state conferences. They're the fundamental beliefs, and I've mentioned them here today, that reward for effort, individual, enterprise, those types of fundamental beliefs of our party, small government, and, also caring for people too that need a support in our community. So the Liberal Party beliefs drive me. People have said a lot about, have I joined the right party? And I remember when I was going through some of those tough times and bad editorials and internal stuff, over the deputy leadership, before the 2010 election, someone put a Labor Party membership form on my seat in Parliament.
Really?
They did, and I believe that was Lara Giddings, who wanted me to come across. I'm not sure she admitted that, but it was kind of looked like her writing.
All right, let's toughen it up a little bit here. Let's start with the elephant in the room.
So we're going to get topical now.
Yeah,
Becher,
I've got the Premier's focus. The stadium. It's a political stinker. It arguably cost you your majority in 2023 when Tucker and Alexander defected. And as Brad will attest, it nearly cost you government in 2024. It was Peter Gutwin's idea, not yours. Why do you persist with it? Is this really the best way to spend your political capital?
Well, the day you stop advocating for things that you do believe in and wanting to take Tasmania to the next level is the day that you should pull the pin, to your previous question. And I'm a believer in economic opportunity, a believer in aspiration, I'm a believer in jobs, and I'm a believer in development. And it just so happens that on that particular site, there's been some great work in terms of the planning and the remediation to get us to this point. But the stadium and the Macquarie Point precinct comes together as a huge opportunity on the waterfront. At the moment, there's hardly anything there. Wasteland, I've referred it to. There's a sewerage works. And we have an idea of putting something iconic on that waterfront, added to the precinct, whether it be bars and clubs, hospitality venues, of course, a hotel and all those matters that can come around a precinct like similarly they do in Adelaide where it works, then why wouldn't you seize that opportunity? It has delivered us an AFL team, and people say, oh, well, you know, AFL dictated this and dictated that. Well, my predecessor did put forward the stadium at Regatta Point. I moved that back to, we announced that in September 22 to Macquarie Point, which I thought was a better fit, and to ensure that, you know, we do grab our team, which people have fought for, and people say, oh, AFL this and AFL that. People have fought for an AFL team for 4 decades, and where's it got us? You know, we had to have some skin in the game, and we had to invest to make it work. And it'll deliver that, but it'll deliver much more as well. You know, I was at the Hurricanes the other day, 15,000 people, packed to the rafters, fantastic. You know, Mitch Owen and all this wonderful story around that, around aspiration, and I can point to Jack Jumpers and the Tassie Devils, and you know that'll be tenfold. But also the economic opportunity of all those people leaving a venue or a match such as that, and in 5 minutes being in Salamanca, enjoying the wonderful hospitality of those venues, and 5 minutes walk, incidentally. And it'll create an economy in itself, but also, you know, people don't fully appreciate what an AFL team will do for Tasmania in terms of that economic opportunity as well, even though it's far more than that. So I know it's a political stinker, but we've gone the hard yards again, digging in deep. We've secured bipartisan support, albeit at times lukewarm. But if there's one criticism that I've always been very sensitive to in all my 2 decades of Parliament is the criticism of we don't know where you stand.
Yeah.
And of all the criticism about me being this and that or whatever else, when people say, oh, well, we don't know what you stand for, that's what worries me most on particular issues. But they know where I stand on that, and we've fought their heart yards. We've secured bipartisan support, and the support's growing. And I want to bring it down to a really local level, if you like. And the people that stop me in the street to say, keep going with that stadium, keep doing it, are not the entrepreneurs. They're not footy players in terms of the AFL or people that would benefit from a growing economy in terms of business. It's the mums, and often mums that I would, say, probably in challenging circumstances themselves economically, that want their little kid to play AFL. And I've had the experience a number of times in the supermarket. I've said this in Parliament, I think. Someone sought me out. Are you Mr. Rockliff? This was late at night. I said, yes, I am. And I was looking dishevelled and, casual clothes and all that, and grabbing some milk that I'd forgotten probably before. But and she made a particular point that her young boy wanted to play AFL. That was all he wanted to do in terms of his aspiration, to keep going with that stadium. And so it's for those people that tug the heartstrings for me, amongst all the other arguments for it. And I can see it work in other states. And they've all been challenging. So I'm not forging a new path here. Everyone that's supported a stadia precinct has gone through political pain.
All right. So one of the other big issues, I think it's definitely doing the rounds in the business community at the moment. I don't know how much farther it's going, but there is an apparent sense of the power of the bureaucracy in Tasmania at the moment over the government and over ministers. Brad's been writing about it in the Font publishing newspapers. I definitely have to watch myself.
You've been ranting about it.
I get triggered a little bit on this one. But do you agree that the bureaucracy has too much power? And if so, what are you going to do about it?
I don't agree because the Cabinet and the executive arm of government and ministers have the power and the Parliament. And we've seen the Parliament, step up and matters have gone through the Parliament of which the bureaucracy has to implement. I'm a big supporter of our public service. They've done wonderful work in difficult circumstances on the back of really tough issues such as the pandemic and the Commission of Inquiry. What I expect from the public service is to implement our policy. And we have, to the criticisms that the people may well make, and there'd be examples, I'm sure, but we've got very clear plans for this term of government. We took them to the last election, the 2030 strong plan for Tasmania's future.
Pull out it into your paddock.
Absolutely. and 100-day plans. And so our expectation, and they are delivering, is that those plans are implemented. First 100 days, second 100 days, third 100 days. And my expectation of our bureaucracy is to implement our agenda. If we get thrown out the last election, they'll be implementing someone else's agenda, no doubt. But our agenda is good. Our agenda provides aspiration, improves the opportunity of home ownership when it comes to aspiration to own your first home, supports cost of living, that downward pressure on cost of living with our renewable energy dividend, which is an initiative of our government, and all the other plans that we've got. That's my expectation.
Well, I can only say I hope the Cabinet hear it when you talk about them pushing it back against the bureaucracy, and I hope that you make that clear to them.
It's a very good point you make, and I've written to all my ministers with my set of expectations of what I want them to deliver. They're in black and white. It's public document. And so I'm holding my ministers to account who are holding their bureaucracies to account. And that should be, a good system of accountability and implementation. And if bureaucracies are going slow on certain areas, I expect my ministers to kick butt and make sure it happens.
So can you give us a good example of where that might be occurring or where that might be about to occur?
In terms of, what I'm very keen on this year is to ensure that we can get, as I say before, housing. And we've got stamp duty incentives. We took to the last election. I was up there in Burnie just the other day when it comes to some new housing initiatives as well, which is great. Minister Ellis has been out talking about the urban boundaries, which is great. So some really good initiatives. But when it comes to planning, I recognise that we need to continuously improve. And what I get annoyed about is the third-party vexatious appeals. It drives me and everyone to drink, and it's frankly unfair. And if someone's got an issue with development or a housing development and it directly impacts them because they're next door, or it's directly impacted them because of their field of endeavour, whatever it might be. But it drives me to drink when we get these third-party vexatious appeals by well-funded green groups, as an example, on mainland Australia, having an impact on our development, making judgments from Sydney, and they're well-paid, green jobs, on what they think Tasmania should be about. Well, what I'm about is growth and opportunity and jobs for people, and not stymieing development. So I want to, take away the shackles, and I look forward to implementing legislation where we ban these third-party vexatious appeals so we can get on with the bloody job.
Beach, that sounds like a Fontcast exclusive.
It does to me.
Is that what you're saying, Premier? Is this a new initiative?
It is a new initiative. Wow. There you go. Well done, lads. You've dragged that out of me.
Legislation this year for the Parliament?
Yes, good, strong agenda. Our focus will be creating a business environment and a growing economy and continue to do so.
I think
we've been very
David
good at
meant,
that.
is that going to be legislated before Parliament this year?
Yeah, that was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. And along with other planning initiatives as well, GBE reform, Dave, quite clearly.
DAPs still, I think, are on the.
DAPS is on the agenda when we come back.
I do want to just talk about one more
Wow,
thing.
excellent.
Yeah. And I sort of had to wrestle with my business partner about
I
this.
said,
but
Beach,
yeah,
are you going to ask about the spirits?
I am, yes.
Now, I've told him he's not allowed to ask about gas on the spirits, okay? Even though it was a promise made by Peter Gutwin and it hasn't happened yet, he's not going to ask about
I
it.
promise not to mention the fact that it's a great initiative.
Beach.
You've done very well not to mention
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah,
I've
okay,
done
well
very
done.
well to make sure there's no mess. When are you going to bring Spirit 4 home, Premier?
Well, Beach, if I can go back a bit and just reflect on where we are and, you know, be under no illusions that I still lie awake at night at 3 o'clock in the morning and say to myself, how in the bloody hell could this happen? And as Premier, I shake my head. And the fact is, it has happened. And the fact is, we need to intervene, which we have, and get the show back on the road. I'm perplexed by it. I've said I've pissed off by it. I've apologised for it. And there's been some enormous learnings for it, which is why we're implementing GBE reform and which is why we've intervened in the project more directly, which we shouldn't have had to do. But at the moment, they're actively seeking leasing arrangements. You'd expect us as a government to do what we can to get value for taxpayers' money, Becher. And so if those leasing arrangements do not come to fruition, then we'll bring Spirit 4 to Tasmania and we'll make sure then we also maximise the opportunities as well in the best interest of taxpayer dollars until we get Berth 3 completed.
Well, I've got to say, if Spirit 4 came to Hobart and it was doing day trips up to Maria Island, I reckon you'd have a queue a mile long of people just wanting to have a go on our boats, see what they're like. We're going through a lot of pain as a state to get them here, but nobody's questioned. We still need to get them here, and don't lose sight of that in terms of bringing them back. That's all I'd say.
Thank you very much. We'll do what all we can to ensure that we get maximise the value for taxpayer dollars, and look forward to some announcements in the near future.
I'm just throwing my question over to David because he expressed an interest in asking about the budget.
I'm sort of reflecting on the S-Lake report, and I was sitting there this morning. We've had a couple of reports out of Treasury that throw long-term questions about the sustainability of our budget. Is there a time we struggle with GST and we struggle with the economic cycles? S-Lake looked at it fairly closely. Is there a time looming in our history where, because we've accumulated too much debt, we just become unsustainable? One of the Treasury reports I read was talking about the mid-2030s. We're really going to struggle as the health budget consumes more and more of the money that we get in. Are we on a long-term sustainable footing?
Yes, we are. And you could expect for us to be where we are when it comes to the investments we've made throughout the pandemic, the investments we've made to ensure our children need to be and must be safe. And you'd expect the investments to grow our economy. People would expect us to invest and grow in our economy as well. But when you look at our economy size and debt ratio, which is around 10%, we do have a sustainable, we'll manage our pathway to surplus, and we'll ensure that we do have a sustainable budget. There's a lot of discussion about debt, I get it, but we've had to invest to ensure we've got through a number of those challenges and continue to grow the economy. Now, Tasmania is a $40 billion economy now. So when you compare that debt to economy ratio, we're one of the best performing states. That doesn't mean that we need to make sure we do have, we're very wise in how we invest our funds. We do need the right size public service. That is a public service that supports the service delivery. But no one's going to argue that we shouldn't have invested in nurses or more paramedics or teachers or more police on the beat, surely. But what we need to do is ensure we have the right size public service for the right size of our state. And this is where we do need to look at ensuring that we manage the public service sustainably, focus on that service delivery area, but ensure we do have the right size public service for what Tasmanians expect us to deliver. I believe very strongly, and this budget will demonstrate a pathway to surplus, and we have to ensure that we take the right amount of time to deliver that. We can, as I said in Parliament the other day, I could balance the budget within 12 months, but there wouldn't be nurses in our hospitals or teachers in our schools or police on the beat. My predecessors, in terms of the Labor Green government, jolted the economy and the service delivery when they essentially got rid of large amounts of the public service in the 2011 budget. And so, we could do that, but it won't be good for the economy and it won't be good into service delivery. And if a pathway over the course of the next few years is all it takes to get to the surplus and to balance the budget, then I believe that is worth waiting for.
And that pathway back, sorry to monopolise the conversation, but that pathway back to surplus and to bringing down the debt, is that going to be resilient enough? We seem to be in a very uncertain world at the moment. Are we relying on everything just continuing to go well economically? It seems that some of the forward indicators are now pointing down. The storm clouds that Michael Ferguson foreshadowed appear to be here. Are we really relying on the luck that we've had over the last 10, 15 years to get us through the next 10?
Well, it hasn't been just luck. We've made some very, good investments in terms of infrastructure growth. What supported the growth of our economy is our investment in enabling infrastructure. And, as I've often said, if you've got to wear a high vis, there is no better supporter of you than a Liberal government, because we have invested in those construction jobs, in education, in education infrastructure and health infrastructure as well, but also enabling infrastructure. And so we won't have a good economy if we don't make the hard decisions and invest in key areas such as transport infrastructure and freight infrastructure, as Beach said, around the spirits, or indeed enabling infrastructure such as the stadium, down the road here. We need to keep growing our economy, and that'll be our focus this year again.
Right, before we finish...
I think, Beach, there's maybe some positive hints from the Premier there. I noted down right size public service.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Is that a watch this space?
Well, it's already pretty much on record in terms of where we need to find savings, and we will find good... Tasmanians expect an efficient public service that delivers for them, not bloated bureaucracies, and that's what I believe in.
Elon Musk's on the way.
He's coming.
Yeah, he's coming. Right. 5 quick-fire questions to finish for you, Premier. Best Labor politician of your time in Parliament?
Paul Lennon.
Best Liberal politician, excluding yourself, of course?
Will Hodgman.
Best...
Loyal deputy to a fault.
Loyal deputy to a fault, correct. Best Green?
It's a low bar.
Yeah.
Nick McKim.
Okay. Other than...
Sorry, that's Sam in the background, listeners, sorry.
I would have put Peg Putt there myself, but... yeah.
Nick
Peg.
was a very good parliamentary performer.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right. Well, other than running over the family can, worst moment?
Worst moment. Look, there are political moments and there are personal moments, but losing Vanessa Goodwin was the lowest point of, I know, Will Hodgman's time and mine as well. She was a wonderful person, a wonderful friend, and you don't expect to attend the farewell of a colleague.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Proudest moment?
There are many proud moments, and the proudest moment I can recall was not opening something or doing something fantastic in terms of ticking a box and those types of things. But my passion in the last 10 years really has been education in terms of a policy sense. The first day of school, the Brighton High, today, the Brighton High School, people criticised it. But, there's a brand new school to support, here we go, infrastructure, a growing community. So you talk about, people often say you're not planning for the future. Here we are looking at, increasing the urban boundaries to support a brand new school of infrastructure. People criticised it at the time, et cetera, I've gone off the point. But when I invest in education and I see that change lives, it brings tears to my eyes. And I recall as an education minister, it was probably around 2015 or 16. It was in St Helens. It was a forum around literacy and adult literacy in particular. And the programs that we'd implemented, and we really rebooted 2610, gave a lot more resource and focus. And when a young father stood up and said, for the first time in my life, I can now read, and I can read to my 5-year-old son. And there wasn't a dry eye in the house, particularly mine. And at that point, I had really twigged the power of education. He was an adult saying it. My motivation is to ensure that adults such as that gentleman don't get to 40 or 50 and not be able to read and write. Because I've said it many times before, and it would be my proudest moment, is the focus that we've had on education. And in recent years, it's been tough nut to crack in getting phonics back in our schools, but bloody hell, it's working. You should see some of these results in these regional schools where these young kids are now, because of that phonetic instruction, can quickly grasp reading, and that changes lives. And it's the one silver bullet, I reckon, I've often said it, is the power of education. And so that collectively would be my proudest moment in Parliament.
Right, it's good to hear. Thank you very much. Fontcast is brought to you by Enterprise Marketing and Research Services, Tasmania's leading and trusted research provider. Thank you, Brad.
Great to be here.
Thank you, David.
Thanks for having me.
And, of course, thank you, Premier.
Thanks all, and thanks to your many, many listeners.
And viewers now.
And viewers.
And viewers. Don't forget you can catch us on our new YouTube channel, Fontcast.
Yeah, just don't get confused with the YouTube channel about fonts.
Literally. Fontcast is produced and directed by Sam Eichen for Eichen Media. Until next time, carry on.